listener production.
Hey, Tara Cassidy with you and welcome to The Briefing. Hollywood stars Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni created a box office hit last year with their film It Ends With Us. But since then, the drama around its release has spiralled into internet chaos and multiple lawsuits with millions on the line.
All of this was, I think, deliberately orchestrated to get attention. And even that's what the big $400 million number is to do as well. Whether he really wanted to get $400 million from Blake is a completely a different story.
But how much of a role did the internet play in all of this? And if the film didn't explore themes of domestic violence, would this have garnered as much attention? That deep dive is coming up in the second half of this episode. First though, let's get into the headlines with Chris Spiru. It's Thursday, the 12th of June.
Hey Tara, and to you listening. Former Hollywood movie mogul Harvey Weinstein has been found guilty of one of 3 alleged sex crimes at a retrial in the US, which formed part of the Me Too movement. The 73-year-old was accused of raping aspiring actress Jessica Mann and assaulting former production assistant Miriam Haley, as well as then 16-year-old aspiring actress Kaya Sokola.
After 5 days of deliberation, Weinstein's been found guilty of assaulting Miriam Haley, but acquitted of his assault charge relating to Ms. Sokola, while the jury's yet to reach a verdict on the alleged rape of Jessica Mann. In 2020, Weinstein's conviction was overturned after he appealed his guilty verdict, with the retrial in Manhattan beginning in April this year and going on for several weeks. Now, this charge relating to the alleged rape of aspiring actress Jessica Mann, the jury's reportedly been unable to reach a unanimous vote, so the judges advised them to continue deliberating to see if they can come to a unanimous decision.
Yeah, and some US outlets have actually reported that there's been issues among the jury, including accusations of threats and yelling at each other, so hopefully they're able to come to a decision soon. Now, Weinstein has not testified at this trial. He's attended court in a wheelchair, having come from hospital while being treated for leukemia. He has pled not guilty to all of the charges.
The Pentagon is reportedly reviewing Australia, the US and UK's AUKUS security pact to ensure it puts America first. The deal was signed in 2021 with bipartisan support from all 3 countries and would see Australia bolstered with nuclear-armed submarines costing $368 billion.
A US defence official told the ABC the deal will be looked at to ensure it aligns with Donald Trump's America First agenda. And according to some UK outlets, that review's apparently being led by an American national security policy official who is also an AUKUS skeptic. Australia's foreign ministry is yet to comment on the review.
Now, for those that aren't in the know about AUKUS and these submarines, the idea is basically that Australia would purchase them from the US in about 5 years' time before building some of its own, probably in Adelaide. And the hope was that the US, UK and Australia could improve their combined military capabilities.
Yeah, and as much as this is like a tech sharing, submarine sharing, it's also an intelligence sharing operation that a lot of defence spokespeople in Australia say is very, very important to our national security. But critics of the deal have long said that it is far too much an America First deal, and that's because there are clauses in there that specify that the US never have to deliver these subs to Australia and the UK if they are delayed in their own production timelines, which is what's actually going on in the States at the moment. So very curious to know where this latest review has come from. Look, if you want to learn a bit more about this deal, I've done a deep dive on it. I will pop that link in the show notes now.
Let's talk pay rises. Some of us are nervous to ask for them, but almost all of us love getting them. And there's one person who's getting a near $15,000 pay bump next month, and that's the Prime Minister. Yep, Anthony Albanese is among the politicians, department secretaries and other senior public servants whose pay packet will jump by 2.4% on July 1, taking his annual salary, Chris, from $607,000 to just over $622,000.
Yeah, and he's not the only one. Opposition leader Susan Lee is up for a $10,000 boost, so she'll be on just over $440,000, as is Treasurer Jim Chalmers, taking his salary to $412,000. Cabinet ministers will be pocketing an extra $4,000 a year, sitting on $412,000, while regular MPs will now be on just under $240,000 a year. Ladies and gentlemen, this is why it is very important to place your vote wisely, because our taxpayer dollars are going towards these people's pockets. In a statement issued by the Remuneration Tribunal, the increase, while matching inflation, was described as relatively modest and is actually 1% less than the country's 3.4% wage growth recorded over the past year.
Yeah, I don't know about that. Do we care about it matching inflation when they're on $400,000 a year? I don't know. But hey, speaking of pay rises in general, it's not just the pollies getting a pay rise. Next month, the national minimum wage will rise by 3.5%, so July 1 as well. So for you briefers listening, we're curious to hear from you. Are you one of the people that's going to be getting a pay rise? Have you gotten one in the last year? Or have you actually had the guts to ask for a pay rise in the past? We'll put a poll up on our Instagram channel if you head to the Briefing Podcast. Head to our bio, click on our channel Behind the Briefing and let us know.
An Aussie consumer group has found many of our most commonly used sunscreens don't live up to their SPF claims. Choice assessed 20 sunscreens that you might buy from your supermarkets and found only 4 of them actually had the SPF level of 50 as they suggested on their labels. One sunscreen, which was the worst of the group, Ultraviolet's Lean Screen SPF 50 Plus Mattifying Zinc, when tested came back with an SPF cover level of only 4.
Yeah, and there was others that didn't meet the mark as well, which were Banana Boat's Baby Zinc Sunscreen Lotion, which is really concerning. A lot of parents would be using that for their toddlers. Aldi's Ombre Everyday Sunscreen and Bondi Sands Zinc Mineral Body Lotion. While the only sunscreen that was tested to actually exceed the coverage it claimed on its bottle, that was La Roche-Posay Wet Skin Sunscreen, which came back at 72, so 20 more than it actually said on its bottle. Interestingly, there were a few brands that had sunscreens that were among those 4 doing the right thing, but then the same brand but just a different variety of their sunscreen didn't meet the standard, having just half of the SPF coverage that they said. So it makes me think that it's something maybe to do with the actual production of the sunscreen rather than the brands themselves trying to do anything dodgy. But I don't know, briefers, do any of you work in this space and you might be able to shed some light on this? If so, let us know in the comments or send us a DM.
And one of Australia's most famous families are at war with Queensland MP Bob Katter. And Tara, any guesses over what?
There's only ever one thing: Crocs.
Well, I ain't spending any time on it because in the meantime, every 3 months, a person is torn to pieces by a crocodile in North Queensland.
Steve Irwin's dad, Bob, has become the latest Irwin to hit out at Katter's proposed legislation to cull crocodiles in the state's north, where there are up to 30,000 in the waterways.
Yeah, and basically Katter wants the crocs that are found in popular areas up in the state's north killed or relocated. Bob Irwin's hit back at that, speaking at a parliamentary hearing yesterday.
The culling of crocodiles willy-nilly is just an absolute stupid statement. 90% of the crocodile attacks or issues are by people being irresponsible.
Yeah, and meanwhile, Terry Irwin has also spoken on this topic and described the laws as lazy and sloppy, which, as you can imagine, Bob Katter just loved.
She knows all about crocodiles. Well, that's rather fascinating for me because she lives in Brisbane. Well, I'm a bit fascinated by that. How would you know about crocodiles if you live in Brisbane? Oh, that's right. She's got them all locked up in a cage in Brisbane. I'd forgotten about that.
Oh, gosh.
He never fails to deliver, that man. But first thing I will point out is that is just factually incorrect. Terry Irwin, Australia Zoo, is not in Brisbane. It's actually a bit north of here on the Sunshine Coast. Look, they are conservationists. They research and help injured animals, and they've actually were really pivotal in helping all the injured animals during our bushfires. And the crocs that are there, they are crocs that have been rescued. But I don't know, look, to Bob's defence, evidence. Crocs are a problem up there, and they have found these crocodiles in really weird spots, even on like farmers' land. So it'll be interesting to see who wins this debate.
Yeah, I mean, I can't believe two of Australia's most famous families are at war, Tara Cassidy. This is a travesty. We'll leave it at that. You are our resident Queenslander. You are the expert, all things Queensland. So thank you for shedding a little bit of extra light there. That brings our headlines to a close for today. Next up is Helen Smith's deep dive, unpacking the Justin Baldoni, Blake Lively drama. It's been going on for ages. There are a lot of moving parts. Stick around for that deep dive. Up for you next.
Co-stars Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni have been dominating headlines ever since the release of the box office hit It Ends With Us. The film, based on the book by Colleen Hoover, has sold over 20 million copies and garnered a cult-like following, explores themes of domestic violence and emotional abuse. And it was directed by Baldoni and co-produced by Lively. And despite the project bringing in over 580 million AU globally, it resulted in multiple lawsuits from both parties, with a judge dismissing Justin Baldoni's US $400 million defamation lawsuit just this week. The press tour also copped a lot of heat due to the themes of the film, with Blake Lively promoting her new hair care brand, Justin Baldoni hiring a crisis manager who previously looked after Johnny Depp and Drake, and reports of some press allegedly being told to steer away from questions on domestic abuse. Laura Masia is a senior reporter from Pedestrian TV. Laura, how was this film first received by the public, and how did it all play out online and on the red carpet in the lead up to its release?
Well, initially when this film was announced, it was met with a lot of excitement from people. This is a book that went crazy viral on TikTok. It sold more than 20 million copies. So fans are really excited to see who was going to be cast and how this text would be portrayed in a film. When Justin Baldoni and Blake Lively were cast, although there was some speculation about their age, they're a little bit old for the characters, people were generally quite excited. But, as we kind of went through the press run, there was a little bit of trepidation, especially since this is a film that is about domestic violence and survivors of domestic abuse. But it seemed to be portrayed as if it was a rom-com, and that everyone should be really excited and bring their friends and wear their florals to go see this happy-go-lucky film. So fans of the book, as well as other domestic violence survivors, were going, hold on a minute, this isn't exactly what this is. So there was a little bit of kind of, simmering vibes there before we got into the actual drama between the co-stars.
Yeah, so can you tell me about kind of what happened next? Who's involved in these lawsuits, and what are the accusations being alleged?
I feel like before we go into the courtroom lawsuits, we should talk about where these theories stemmed from. Because at the very beginning, it was complete speculation. Fans had just noticed that during the press run, Justin Baldoni wasn't really anywhere to be seen, and he's the main character as well as the director. So that was a bit of a red flag for viewers. And then once we got to the premiere in New York in August, then fans really started smelling a rat when Justin Baldoni was only in photos by himself and with his wife Emily, whereas the rest of the cast, including Blake Lively and her husband Ryan Reynolds, were taking photos with everyone.
And then from all of these theories, it kind of got a lot more serious. Lawsuits came into play. What can you tell us about who's involved in these lawsuits and what's being alleged?
So after the press run, it was about 4 months after the press run, that Blake Lively filed a legal complaint against Justin Baldoni and his studio, Wayfarer Studios. And she alleged that he had sexually harassed her and that he'd set out to systematically destroy her reputation through an orchestrated smear campaign. Because as the press run was happening, and after fans started to sense this disconnect between the stars, there were things coming out against Blake Lively that made the audiences kind of turn on her. Things like old resurfaced interviews and moments from the press tour that seemed a bit prickly. So this filing kind of was Blake saying, no, this was systematic, this was intentional. And it was also followed up by an article in the New York Times the next day, which went in depth about these claims, as well as included alleged text messages between Melissa Nathan, who was his kind of PR executive who has worked with Johnny Depp and deals with these cases where things are getting a bit, haywire with their reputation. And it included these text messages between them in which they claimed that they were trying to quote-unquote bury Blake Lively, change the narrative, and even start threads of theories. But it wasn't until December 31st last year that we actually saw a legal filing, a retaliation from Justin Baldoni. He filed a lawsuit, a $250 million USD lawsuit against the New York Times for essentially defamation, although libel in the States. And in an 87-page filing, he claimed that the article, and I quote, had cherry-picked and altered communications stripped of necessary context and deliberately spliced to mislead. Then, like 15 days later, he came back with another lawsuit, which was a $400 million lawsuit in USD against Blake and Ryan Reynolds for damages over claims of extortion, defamation, and invasion of privacy. So big numbers here. This is very dramatic. This is intended to grab headlines.
So on that $400 million lawsuit by Justin Baldoni, that's recently been dismissed. What's the reaction been to that?
Well, I imagine for Blake, there's been a lot of relief, but also there's been a lot of people going, what? Like, the reason that it was dismissed was because Judge Lyman, who's this New York judge who's running the case or making decisions on the case, basically said that Baldoni can't sue for defamation or libel over claims of sexual harassment because it's protected and exempt by law, because he's essentially filing against claims she made an illegal complaint to begin with. And I find this crazy that it wasn't flagged earlier. So the reactions have been quite surprised that that's the reason why the case has been dismissed. Judge Lyman also threw out the case against the New York Times because it was citing that it was under the fair report privilege.
And there are still some lawsuits that will be playing out later on and going into next year, but we'll get into those a little bit later. Why do you think, though, this story has created so much controversy? Do you think if these two co-starred, if it wasn't It Ends With Us, which does explore, themes of domestic violence, emotional abuse, would this story have become as big as it is?
I'm in two minds. I think it would have, ultimately. But one of the reasons why it was under such a microscope was because of the interest in the initial text, because of the fans who loved It Ends With Us so much. That's why people had opinions, and that's why they were looking over everything that went down with a fine-tooth comb. But I do think just kind of the culture and the way that social media works now, our algorithms are programmed to look for drama, for tea, for any inkling that something is going on. I think we saw it in 2022 with Don't Worry, Darling, right? We were looking for all of these instances where co-stars might not get along. And it almost became part of the publicity for this film. And we referred to this in the Pedestrian office. We referred to It Ends With Us as Don't Worry, Darling Part 2 because it was so big for us to cover. And we've also seen it even with The White Lotus with Amy Lou Wood and Walton Goggins. It all started with an unfollowing, and that's exactly what we saw as well with Blake and with Justin. So I think that our algorithms are primed to seek negative vibes, to seek where drama and beef might be. It would have been headline grabbing no matter what.
So how much of a role has the internet played in the public perception of these lawsuits in determining who's right and wrong?
Oh, so much. I think that the way in which both legal teams have played this legal game has been very much tailored to the way that we report on news and the way that social media kind of distributes information. Throughout the whole thing, Justin Baldoni's team especially were releasing clips and even at one point had a full-on website that had all of his evidence ready to go, ready to be read by anyone who wanted to. Even at one point, he subpoenaed Taylor Swift, who obviously we know grabs headlines every single day for doing anything. So all of this was, I think, deliberately orchestrated to get attention. And even that's what the big $400 million number is to do as well. Whether he really wanted to get $400 million from Blake is a completely a different story.
And we saw a similar reaction play out online with Amber Heard and Johnny Depp with their case. And you mentioned before Justin Baldoni hired the same crisis manager as Johnny Depp. How much do you think PR and the masterclass of PR celebrity is playing into our algorithms that we see online?
I think we see it a lot. I don't know how much of what we saw was orchestrated, right? This is a legal case. We don't know what is locked in, what isn't. However, I do think it's really fascinating when you go and look at the public opinion that Blake faced especially, so through the press run, and then watch how it shifted. And I think that These things happen subtly behind the scenes every single day. And now that celebrities are so much closer to us with social media, they're expected to kind of connect with us one-to-one instead of it just being through the press like it used to be. We've never been so close to celebrities as we are now, and we've never expected so much authenticity. And I think that every move is a PR move, whether we understand that as viewers and people absorbing this content or not. That's just kind of our modern day reality.
Okay, what happens next? There's still Blake Lively's own lawsuit that is going ahead. How are we going to see this unfold?
Yeah, so we have a lot that we'll see play out in the media, probably with this case. It's certainly not over. In a statement after the case was dismissed, Blake Lively's legal team said, "As we have said from day one, this $400 million lawsuit was a sham and the courts will right through it. We look forward to the next round, which is seeking attorney's fees, treble damages and punitive damages against Baldoni, Sarowitz, Nathan and the other Wayfarer parties who have perpetrated this abusive litigation." And although Justin Baldoni's lawyer has clapped back saying that Blake's assertion that it was a victory was false, they still are able to make some amendments in the initial countersuit. So basically, Judge Lyman did assert that Baldoni and his legal team may refile, but only on claims that Blake Lively breached a contract. So they have until June 23rd to amend these, otherwise they can kind of drop their case. So as it stands, Blake Lively's case against Justin Baldoni will face court on March 9th, 2026. So we have a long way to go until this really does wrap.
Laura, thank you so much for joining us on The Briefing.
Thank you so much for having me. It was so much fun.
That was Laura Masia, senior reporter from Pedestrian TV. And that's it for this episode of The Briefing. If you can subscribe or follow, it's the easiest way you can support us. And you can follow us on Instagram at The Briefing Podcast. And we'll be back in your feed with another ep this afternoon. I'm Helen Smith. Catch you next time.
Listener.